A black teacher defends a racist white student. After the incident, she spreads terrible lies about him. The bell rang, a shrill reminder that another day at Westfield High had begun. Lisa Johnson stood at the door of her classroom, a welcoming smile plastered on her face as students trickled in. The walls were adorned with colorful posters of famous black figures in history, each representing a lesson learned, a story untold. The vibrant energy of the classroom was palpable as students chatted about their weekend plans, their voices blending into a symphony of youthful exuberance. "Good morning, everyone. Let's settle down and get started," Lisa called, her voice warm yet authoritative. The chatter gradually faded into a comfortable silence as students took their seats. She scanned the room, her heart swelling with pride as she looked at the diverse faces staring back at her. This was her sanctuary. Today we're going to discuss the theme of identity in literature. I want to hear your thoughts on how characters reflect their backgrounds, Lisa said, stepping to the front of the room. She leaned against her desk, exuding confidence. Can anyone give me an example of a character who struggles with their identity? A few hands shot up and Lisa pointed to a girl in the back row. Maya? Maya Thompson, a bright-eyed junior with curly hair framing her face, spoke up. I think of Richard Wright in Native Son. He deals with racial injustice and his identity in a society that doesn't accept him. Yes, great example. Now let's dig deeper. How does his experience shape his actions? Lisa encouraged, her enthusiasm infectious. The discussion flowed, students building on one another's ideas, the classroom buzzing with intellectual energy. As the lesson continued, Lisa noticed Brian Thompson, Maya's older brother, slouched in his chair, a smirk plastered across his face. He was handsome in a way that made him the center of attention, his blonde hair tousled, his blue eyes sparkling with mischief. But beneath that charm lay a troubling undercurrent, a tendency to provoke and belittle those he deemed beneath him. Lisa had seen it before, the way he wielded his popularity like a weapon, often at the expense of others. Okay, class, Lisa said, her tone shifting as she prepared to transition to a new activity. I want you to break into groups and discuss how identity affects the choices characters make. Let's see if we can relate that to our own lives. As students shuffled around, Lisa approached Brian, who leaned back in his seat, clearly uninterested in the discussion. Brian, can you try to engage a bit more today? You've got a lot to offer. Yeah, sure, Ms. Johnson, he replied, rolling his eyes, the sarcasm dripping from his voice. I'll do my best. Lisa stepped away, shaking her head slightly, but the tension lingered. She returned to her desk and glanced at the clock, noticing the minutes slipping away. Just as she was about to refocus the class, a loud outburst pierced the air. Shut up, you're just a bunch of losers, Brian shouted, his voice booming across the room. The laughter that followed was instantaneous, a twisted confirmation of his dominance. Lisa's heart sank as she turned to see a group of students giggling, clearly amused by Brian's cruelty directed at a quieter student, Amir, who had been trying to contribute to the discussion. Brian, that's not appropriate, Lisa said, her tone firm as she stepped forward, her heart racing. Everyone deserves respect here. Respect? Brian scoffed, his tone mocking. Why should I respect people who can't even speak properly? Look at Amir. He's just trying to be part of the conversation. The laughter intensified, and Lisa felt a wave of anger wash over her. She could see Amir's face flush with humiliation, his eyes downcast, a stark contrast to the confidence he had shown just moments before. The classroom, once a safe space, felt suffocating. Enough, Lisa's voice cut through the laughter like a knife. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Brian, we're here to support one another, not tear each other down. Brian leaned back, crossing his arms defiantly. Whatever, Ms. Johnson, you're just mad because I'm right. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to rein in her frustration. This isn't about being right or wrong, Brian. It's about creating a positive environment for everyone. We're all here to learn. Brian shrugged, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps a hint of uncertainty or something deeper. Lisa hoped to reach him, to help him understand the weight of his words. But before she could continue, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. All right, everyone, I want you to reflect on today's discussion for homework. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow, Lisa said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. She watched as students filed out, her heart heavy with concern for Amir and the growing divide in her classroom. As the last student left, Lisa turned to Brian, who lingered by the door. "Can we talk for a moment?" she asked, her tone softer now, a mixture of authority and empathy. "About what?" Brian asked, feigning innocence. "About your comment today," Lisa began, crossing her arms. "I know you have a strong personality, but it's important to be mindful of how your words affect others. You have influence, and with that comes responsibility." Brian shrugged, a smirk creeping back onto his face. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Ms. Johnson. Amir's a joke. Maybe you should reconsider what you think everyone's thinking," Lisa replied, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "You don't know what other people are going through. You may not realize how harmful your words can be." Brian opened his mouth to retort, but Lisa held up a hand. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to help you grow. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's how we learn from them that matters." Brian's expression shifted for a moment, the bravado faltering as he met her gaze. For a fleeting second, Lisa saw a glimmer of vulnerability, but it quickly vanished, replaced by his usual bravado. "Whatever you say, Ms. Johnson," he muttered, before walking out, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts. As she sat at her desk, staring at the empty seats, a wave of doubt washed over her. Had she done the right thing by confronting Brian? Was defending him the right choice? The questions swirled in her mind like a turbulent storm. She wanted to believe that he could change, that her support might lead him to introspection. But with each passing moment, the weight of her decision pressed down on her. Just then, the principal, Mrs. Collins, popped her head into the room. "Lisa, can I see you for a moment?" Lisa straightened, forcing a smile as she walked to the door. "Of course, what's up?" "I heard about the incident with Brian," Mrs. Collins said, her tone serious. "I want to commend you for your handling of the situation, but I also need to remind you that we have a code of conduct in this school. It's important to maintain authority." Lisa nodded, feeling the familiar knot in her stomach tighten. "I understand, but I believe in giving students the chance to learn from their mistakes." "I get that, but we can't let one student's actions disrupt the whole class," Ms. Collins replied, crossing her arms. "I'm concerned about the message this sends to other students, especially those who are more vulnerable." "I know, and I'll do better to address it," Lisa assured her, her voice steady despite her unease. "I just think Brian needs guidance, not punishment." Mrs. Collins regarded her for a moment, her expression softening slightly. "I appreciate your dedication, Lisa. Just remember, sometimes tough love is what they really need." As the principal walked away, Lisa felt a sense of foreboding settle in her chest. She had defended Brian in front of the class, sure, but what if it backfired? What if her decision led to more harm than good? The uncertainty loomed large, casting a shadow over her resolve. The rest of the day passed in a blur, Lisa's mind racing with thoughts of her students and the challenges they faced. She knew she had to tread carefully, especially with Brian. As she prepared for her next class, the door swung open and Maya entered, her face flushed with excitement. "Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to say that I really loved your lesson today," Maya said, her enthusiasm contagious. "It's so important to talk about identity and how it affects us." "Thank you, Maya. That means a lot," Lisa replied, her heart lifting slightly. "You always bring such great insights." Maya beamed, and for a moment Lisa felt a sense of hope. Perhaps she could guide her students, including Brian, toward understanding and growth. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing, and the consequences of her choices were yet to unfold. As Lisa settled into her next class, she couldn't shake the unease that lingered from her earlier encounter with Brian. The room buzzed with chatter as students filed in, but her mind was elsewhere. She glanced at the clock, counting down the minutes until the bell would ring, signaling the end of the day. "All right, everyone," Lisa called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Let's focus on our next topic, the impact of social dynamics in literature. I want to hear your thoughts on how relationships shape a character's journey. Let's break into small groups." The students quickly paired off, but Lisa's eyes were drawn to Brian, who sat with his friends at the back of the room. They were whispering and laughing, and she could see Brian's smirk as he leaned back, clearly enjoying the camaraderie. A knot tightened in her stomach at the thought of how he had treated Amir earlier. "Okay, let's hear some examples," Lisa encouraged, moving among the groups, listening to their discussions. She stopped at a group where Amir was seated, his face still a little pale from the earlier incident. Amir, what do you think? Lisa asked, kneeling beside him, hoping to draw him out. Amir looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. I think social dynamics can really limit a character's choices. Like in The Great Gatsby, where Gatsby's background affects his relationship with Daisy, he said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. Exactly. That's a great example, Lisa said, her heart warming at Amir's growing confidence. She felt a sense of relief. Perhaps today's lesson could help him heal from the humiliation he had experienced. As she continued to circulate the room, she overheard snippets of conversation from Brian's group. She's so biased, it's like she's trying to protect him or something, Brian sneered, and laughter erupted around him. Lisa's stomach twisted at the sound. The undercurrent of ridicule hung heavy in the air, and she knew she had to address it. But how? She felt a sharp pang of frustration. Why was it so difficult for some students to see beyond their own privilege? The bell rang, cutting through her thoughts, and students began to pack up. Lisa stood at the front of the room, mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan to address the negativity she had witnessed. Remember, your essays on today's discussion are due on Friday, she called out as the students filed out. Brian lingered, his friend slipping out, leaving the two of them alone. Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice dripping with disdain, you really think you can change people? I mean, look at Amir. He'll never fit in. Brian, that's not true, Lisa replied, trying to maintain her composure. Everyone deserves a chance, including you. I want you to reflect on your role in this classroom. Reflect? On what? Brian shot back, crossing his arms defiantly. I'm just being real. You're the one who's out of touch if you think everyone can just get along. Lisa took a deep breath, searching for the right words. You know, Brian, real change often starts with understanding. You have the potential to lead, but that means being aware of how your words and actions affect those around you. Brian rolled his eyes, but Lisa could see a flicker of something deeper in his expression. Sure, Ms. Johnson, whatever you say, he muttered, before turning on his heel and walking out, leaving Lisa feeling both defeated and resolute. After school, Lisa stayed behind, grading papers and reflecting on her day. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the classroom. She was lost in thought when her phone buzzed, pulling her back to reality. A message from a colleague flashed on the screen. I heard about the incident with Brian. Just a heads up, some parents are concerned. We need to keep our eyes on this. Lisa sighed, rubbing her temples. The pressure from the administration and the community weighed heavily on her shoulders. She knew she had to navigate the situation delicately, but how could she do that while staying true to her beliefs? As she packed her things, her mind wandered back to Brian. She wanted to believe he could change, that he could learn from his mistakes. But how could she help him see the damage he was causing? The next day, the atmosphere in the classroom was tense. Students whispered in clusters, casting furtive glances toward Brian, who appeared unfazed, his bravado intact. Lisa sensed the divide had only deepened overnight. Good morning, everyone. Today, let's talk about the theme of redemption in literature. Lisa began, trying to shift the focus to a more positive topic. Can anyone think of a character who seeks redemption? Maya raised her hand. In A Lesson Before Dying, Grant Wiggins wants to help Jefferson, and through that journey, he seeks his own redemption. Yes, excellent example, Maya, Lisa said, her heart swelling with pride. Redemption is a powerful theme. It's about acknowledging our mistakes and striving to do better. As the discussion progressed, Lisa noticed Brian's attention drifting. He was scrolling through his phone, a slight smirk playing on his lips. The moment felt like a ticking time bomb, and Lisa's anxiety spiked. Suddenly, the classroom door swung open, and a new student walked in, a tall black girl with striking features and a confident demeanor. Lisa recognized her instantly from the enrollment form she had received just the day before. This was Maya's cousin Kendra, who had just moved from out of state. Sorry I'm late, Kendra said, flashing a bright smile. I'm Kendra. I just got here. Welcome, Kendra. We're just discussing the theme of redemption in literature. Would you like to join us? Lisa gestured to an empty seat next to Maya. As Kendra settled in, Brian's demeanor shifted. He straightened in his chair, eyes narrowing as he assessed the newcomer. Lisa sensed a shift in the energy of the room, the tension between Brian and Kendra palpable. Can you believe this place? Kendra said, her voice confident and playful. I mean, I've heard some stories about Westfield. It's like a reality show. Laughter erupted, and even Brian couldn't suppress a chuckle, though his expression quickly turned sour. Lisa felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Kendra's arrival could bring some much-needed change to the dynamics of the classroom. "Let's hear your thoughts on redemption, Kendra," Lisa said, eager to involve her in the discussion. Kendra thought for a moment, her brows furrowing. "I think redemption is about taking responsibility. Like, if you mess up, you have to own it and make things right, right?" "Exactly," Lisa said, encouraged by Kendra's insight. "It's about growth and transformation. It can be difficult, but it's worth it." Brian, however, interjected. "Yeah, but not everyone can change. Some people are just stuck in their ways." Lisa felt a surge of frustration. "That's not true, Brian. Everyone has the capacity for change, but it requires understanding and support." Brian rolled his eyes, but Lisa could see Kendra's gaze sharpening, a flicker of defiance in her expression. "And what about you, Brian?" she challenged. "Are you willing to change? Or are you just going to keep hiding behind that facade?" The room fell silent. Lisa held her breath, the tension hanging thick in the air. Brian's expression darkened, and for a moment, Lisa feared he might lash out. But instead he laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the quiet classroom. "Please, I don't need to justify anything to you." "Maybe you should," Kendra shot back, unyielding. "You might learn something about yourself if you were willing to listen." Lisa's heart raced as she watched the confrontation unfold. This was the pivotal moment she had feared, a clash between Brian's arrogance and Kendra's fierce spirit. She could feel the stakes rising, knowing that how she handled this could either reinforce the divide or pave the way for understanding. "All right, let's refocus," Lisa interjected, stepping in to diffuse the situation. "Kendra, thank you for your input. And Brian, I appreciate your perspective, but we're here to learn from one another. Let's keep the conversation constructive." As the discussion continued, Lisa felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Kendra's presence had shifted the dynamic, but the underlying tensions remained. She knew that the journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and perhaps a bit of tough love. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Lisa took a deep breath, aware that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The next few days at Westfield High felt like a tightrope walk for Lisa Johnson. The tension in her classroom had escalated following Kendra's arrival, and Lisa sensed an undercurrent of animosity brewing between Brian and Kendra. Brian's friends whispered and laughed at her expense, emboldened by Brian's disdain. Lisa found herself constantly on edge, aware that one misstep could spark an explosion. As the week progressed, Lisa noticed the ripple effect of Brian's earlier comments. Amir's confidence had taken a hit. He became increasingly withdrawn, often avoiding eye contact and participating less in class discussions. Lisa felt a pang of guilt every time she caught a glimpse of him, the echoes of Brian's mockery still fresh in her mind. On Thursday, Lisa decided to address the issues head-on. During a morning meeting with the staff, she brought up the growing concern about the classroom dynamics. "I think it's crucial we create a more inclusive environment," Lisa said, her voice steady but firm. "Students need to feel safe and respected in order to learn effectively." Mrs. Collins, the principal, nodded thoughtfully. "I agree, Lisa, but we need to ensure that our approach doesn't alienate students who are struggling to fit in. We want to encourage dialogue, not hostility." "Exactly," Lisa replied, her heart racing. "But if we don't confront the negativity, it will only fester and grow. I'm concerned about the impact Brian's behavior is having on the other students." Mrs. Collins leaned back in her chair. "Perhaps we could facilitate a workshop on respect and inclusion. It might help bridge the gap between students." Lisa felt a flicker of hope. "That's a great idea. A workshop could create a space for dialogue and understanding." As the meeting wrapped up, Lisa's mind raced with possibilities. She envisioned a forum where students could express their feelings, share their experiences, and ultimately learn from one another. But as the bell rang, signaling the end of the meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that the workshop would be a battleground. The following day, Lisa prepared for the workshop with mixed excitement and anxiety. She set up the classroom in a circle, encouraging openness and dialogue. Students began to filter in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Good morning, everyone, Lisa greeted as they settled into their seats. Today, we're going to have an open discussion about respect and inclusion. I want everyone to feel comfortable sharing their thoughts. Brian strolled in late, his usual swagger on full display. He glanced around the room, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth as he took his seat. Lisa's stomach twisted at the sight of him. She knew he could derail the conversation with a single comment. Let's start by discussing what respect means to each of us, Lisa said, trying to keep her tone light. Kendra, would you like to kick us off? Kendra nodded, her expression serious. To me, respect means recognizing each other's worth, regardless of our differences. It's about listening and valuing what others bring to the table. Great point, Lisa encouraged, glancing around the circle. She hoped others would follow suit. Amir spoke up next, albeit hesitantly. It means treating people how you want to be treated. I think when people are disrespectful, it just makes everything worse. Brian shifted in his seat, his arms crossed defiantly. Sure, but what if you don't think that person is worth your respect? Like, what if it's someone who's just, I don't know, not good enough? The air thickened with tension as Lisa's heart raced. Brian, that's exactly what we're trying to address. Respect isn't about judgment. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, regardless of our differences. Sounds like a bunch of nonsense to me, Brian Sean replied, the smirk returning. Some people just don't deserve respect. Kendra's eyes narrowed, and Lisa sensed the challenge brewing. That's not true. Everyone has a story, and you never know what someone else is going through. It's easy to judge from the outside, but respect is about understanding. Brian leaned back, clearly unfazed. And what if I don't want to understand? Why should I care about everyone's feelings? Lisa felt the room shift as students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some were nodding along with Kendra, while others appeared sympathetic to Brian's perspective. The divide was palpable. Because it's the right thing to do, Brian, Lisa said, her voice firm. We're not here to tear each other down. We're here to learn and grow together. Learn what? To be a bunch of pushovers? Brian shot back, a hint of anger creeping into his tone. Brian, this isn't about being a pushover. Kendra interjected, her voice steady. It's about being human. You might find that showing kindness can actually strengthen you, not weaken you. The tension hung heavy in the air, and Lisa felt the weight of the moment. She knew this confrontation could either lead to a breakthrough or a complete breakdown. Let's take a step back, Lisa suggested, trying to regain control of the conversation. How about we share personal experiences where we felt respected or disrespected? Maybe that will help us understand each other better. The room was silent for a moment, the students exchanging glances. Finally, Amir raised his hand. I remember a time when I was bullied in middle school. It felt awful, like no one cared about me. But then, one teacher stood up for me. That made a huge difference. Thank you for sharing that, Amir, Lisa said, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It takes courage to speak up. Kendra chimed in, her voice filled with empathy. I had a similar experience when I moved to a new school. At first, I felt like an outsider, but one girl reached out and helped me feel included. It made all the difference. Lisa felt a swell of hope as other students began to share their stories, the atmosphere slowly shifting from hostility to understanding. But Brian sat in silence, his expression unreadable. As the discussion continued, Lisa could see Kendra's unwavering confidence clashing with Brian's defiance. The tension was palpable, and Lisa knew that Brian's next comment could either ignite a firestorm or lead to a moment of reflection. Finally, Brian spoke. So what? You think sharing sad stories is going to change anything? People are who they are. It's not that deep. Kendra crossed her arms, unflinching. It is deep. It's about empathy. If you can't see the value in understanding someone else's experience, then you're missing out on what it means to be human. The room fell silent again, the weight of Kendra's words lingering in the air. Lisa held her breath, watching Brian's reaction. She could see the conflict in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty that gave her hope. Maybe you think you're better than everyone else, Kendra continued, her tone steady. But one day you might find yourself in a position where you need someone to see you for who you are. And if you keep pushing people away, you might end up alone. Brian shifted in his seat, his bravado wavering for the first time. I'm not afraid of being alone. I can handle it. Lisa seized the moment, her heart racing. But should you two have to? Everyone deserves a chance to connect, Brian. You have the power to uplift others instead of tearing them down. Why not use that influence for good? The bell rang, signaling the end of the workshop. Lisa felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The conversation had been intense, but the potential for change hung in the air like a charged current. "Thank you all for sharing today," Lisa said as the students began to gather their things. "Let's carry this conversation forward. I believe we can create a more inclusive environment together." Students filed out, their expressions a mix of contemplation and uncertainty. Lisa caught Kendra's eye, and the two exchanged a nod of understanding. But as Brian exited the room, Lisa felt a tightening in her chest. She knew that this was just the beginning. The battle for respect and understanding was far from over, and she could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. The following week began with a palpable tension in the air. Lisa Johnson arrived at Westfield High, determined to maintain the momentum from the workshop, but she could feel the storm brewing. The whispers among students grew louder, the divide between Brian and Kendra becoming increasingly apparent. The energy in the hallways shifted. Students were either rallying around Brian or gravitating toward Kendra, and Lisa feared that the rift would widen. As she entered her classroom, Lisa noticed a group of students huddled together, their voices hushed. They looked up when she walked in, quickly shifting their attention to their desks. Brian was at his usual spot, leaning back in his chair with a smug expression, clearly reveling in the attention. "All right, everyone. Let's settle down," Lisa called out, trying to project confidence despite the unease in her gut. "Today, we're going to dive into character development and how relationships influence growth." As she began the lesson, Lisa caught sight of Amir, who sat quietly in the front row. He appeared more withdrawn than ever, often glancing at Brian, who was making snide remarks to his friends. Lisa's heart ached for Amir. She wanted to protect him from the cruelty that lingered like a dark cloud over the classroom. "Let's break into groups again," Lisa suggested, hoping that the small conversations would allow students to connect and engage. "I want each group to choose a character from our readings and discuss how their relationships impact their development." As students moved around, Lisa noticed Brian's friends cluster around him like a protective barrier. Kendra, on the other hand, gravitated toward Amir, encouraging him to join her group. Lisa felt a spark of hope. Perhaps Kendra could help Amir regain some of his lost confidence. When the groups began discussing their characters, Lisa made a point to circulate the room, listening in on conversations. She stopped by Kendra and Amir's group, where Kendra was passionately discussing a character's struggle with self-identity. "Amir, what do you think about how this character learns from their relationships?" Kendra asked, her voice inviting. Amir hesitated, glancing at Brian's group, which erupted in laughter at some offhand remark. I think they learned that friendship is important, even when it's hard," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," Kendra replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "Relationships can shape who we are, for better or worse." Lisa felt a swell of pride as she watched Kendra encourage Amir, but when she turned her attention to Brian's group, the atmosphere was entirely different. Brian was recounting the workshop, twisting Kendra's words into something mocking. "Yeah, Kendra thinks we should all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Real life isn't that simple. Some people are just losers, and you can't change that." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room as Lisa felt a surge of anger. This was exactly what she feared. The toxicity that Brian perpetuated was creeping back into the classroom. "Brian," Lisa said, her voice firm yet calm, "that kind of talk isn't acceptable. We're here to support one another, not tear each other down." He smirked, clearly unfazed. "Whatever, Ms. Johnson, just trying to keep it real." "Real? Or just cruel?" Lisa challenged, her heart pounding. "You're missing the point of our discussions. It's not just about being honest. It's about being kind." "Kindness doesn't get you anywhere," Brian retorted, crossing his arms defiantly, a smug expression on his face. "Maybe that's why you're so soft on everyone, because you're scared of the truth." Lisa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Brian, truth without kindness only creates division. You have a choice in how you interact with others, and I hope you choose to uplift rather than belittle." The bell rang, interrupting their exchange, and students began to pack up. Lisa felt a weight on her shoulders, the battle far from over. She couldn't help but notice the way Brian's words echoed in the air, the impact they had on the students around him. As the day progressed, Lisa found herself distracted, her mind racing with thoughts of how to address the escalating situation. That evening, she decided to reach out to Mrs. Collins, requesting a meeting to discuss Brian's behavior. The next day, Lisa sat across from Mrs. Collins in the principal's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm concerned about Brian's influence in the classroom," Lisa began, her voice steady. "He's creating a toxic environment, and it's affecting the other students, especially Amir and Kendra." Mrs. Collins nodded, her expression serious. "I've heard some complaints from parents about Brian's behavior. It seems he's been stirring up trouble, and we need to address it." "I think a more proactive approach could help," Lisa suggested. "Perhaps we can have a school-wide assembly where we address respect and inclusion directly. It could set the tone for the entire school." "That's a great idea, Lisa. I'll work on scheduling it for next week," Mrs. Collins replied. "But we also need to intervene with Brian directly. I'll have a conversation with him about his behavior and the impact it's having." Lisa felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you. I truly believe he can change if given the right guidance." As they wrapped up the meeting, Lisa felt a renewed sense of determination. She would fight for her students, no matter how challenging the road ahead. The next day, Lisa entered the classroom with a sense of purpose. She reminded herself that the upcoming assembly could shift the narrative, but she also knew that the real work would happen in the classroom. "Good morning, everyone," Lisa greeted, her voice bright. "As you know, we have our assembly next week, and I want to prepare you for it. We'll be discussing respect and the importance of inclusion." The students shifted in their seats, some exchanging glances while others looked genuinely curious. Lisa caught Brian's eye, and he rolled his, a dismissive gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. "Today, let's brainstorm what we want to communicate during the assembly," Lisa continued. "What messages do we want to share about respect and understanding?" Hands shot up around the room, eager to contribute. Kendra's hand was among them, and Lisa smiled at her enthusiasm. "Kendra, go ahead." "I think we should talk about the importance of listening to each other's experiences," Kendra suggested. "A lot of times, we assume we know someone's story without really knowing them." "That's a powerful message," Lisa agreed, feeling proud of Kendra's insight. "Who else has ideas?" Amir spoke up, his voice stronger than before. "We could share how our differences make us stronger. It's important to recognize that diversity is a strength." "Yes, diversity enriches our experiences and perspectives," Lisa said, her heart swelling. She felt a sense of hope, watching as the students rallied around each other, encouraging one another to speak up. As the discussion continued, Lisa noticed that Brian remained silent, his expression unreadable. The shift in the classroom atmosphere was palpable. The students united in their desire for change. But just as a sense of camaraderie began to settle in, Brian finally spoke up. "This is all just a bunch of fluff. You really think people care about what we have to say? They're just going to roll their eyes and move on." The room fell silent. Lisa felt a surge of frustration but reminded herself to stay calm. "Brian, this is our chance to make a difference. If we don't speak up, how will anything change?" "Change? Please. You think a few speeches will fix everything? People are who they are," he said, leaning back in his chair, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Then you should reconsider your perspective," Kendra shot back, her tone unwavering. "Because what you're saying is exactly why we need to have these conversations. It's not about fixing people, it's about creating understanding." Brian sneered, but Lisa could see the cracks beginning to form in his facade. The growing confidence in Amir and Kendra shone through, and she could feel the tide turning, even if only slightly. "Let's keep this discussion going," Lisa said, hoping to redirect the energy. "Remember, every voice counts, and we need to lift each other up as we prepare for the assembly." As the bell rang signaling the end of class, Lisa felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The battle was far from over, but the seeds of change had been planted. The day of the assembly arrived with an air of anticipation and anxiety swirling through the halls of Westfield High. Lisa Johnson stood in the gymnasium, adjusting the microphone as students filed in, their chatter creating a low hum that echoed off the walls. She felt a mix of excitement and dread. This was a pivotal moment for her students, a chance to address the growing divide and promote unity. As she looked out at the sea of familiar faces, Lisa's heart raced. She spotted Kendra and Amir sitting together, their expressions a blend of determination and apprehension. Brian was further back, flanked by his friends, A smug grin plastered across his face. She could sense the tension radiating from him, a looming storm ready to unleash chaos. "All right, everyone, let's settle down," Lisa called, her voice cutting through the noise. The gymnasium gradually quieted, and she felt a surge of adrenaline as she stepped forward. Today, we're here to discuss respect, inclusion, and what it means to be part of a community. Kendra stood beside her, and together they shared their vision for the assembly. "We want to create a space where everyone feels valued and heard," Kendra said, her voice strong. "It's time to confront the negativity that has crept into our school and to stand together as a united front." The students appeared engaged, but Lisa noticed Brian's expression darkening. He leaned over to his friends, whispering something that set them off into a fit of laughter. The sight sent a pang of frustration through Lisa. She knew Brian would not take this opportunity to reflect on his behavior. As the assembly progressed, various students took turns speaking, sharing their experiences and insights about respect. Amir spoke passionately about his journey, recounting the struggles he faced as a minority in a predominantly white school. "I've felt the weight of judgment and the sting of disrespect," he said, his voice steady. "But I've also learned that kindness can change lives. We need to lift each other up, not tear each other down." The audience erupted into applause, and Lisa's heart swelled with pride for Amir. Kendra followed, sharing her own story of moving to a new school and the challenges she faced as an outsider. "Respect is about recognizing each other's humanity," she said. "We all have a story worth sharing, and it's time we start listening." With each passing speech, Lisa felt a sense of hope building. Students were connecting, sharing their experiences, and fostering understanding. But Brian remained silent, his demeanor growing more sullen as the assembly progressed. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, the principal, Mrs. Collins, took the stage, her presence commanding. "Today we've heard powerful stories about the importance of respect and inclusion," she said, her voice resonating throughout the gym. "But we cannot ignore the challenges we face. It is our responsibility to create an environment where everyone feels safe and valued." Lisa's heart raced, anticipating the response that would follow. As Mrs. Collins wrapped up her speech, she opened the floor for questions and comments. A hand shot up from the back of the gym. It was Brian. "Can I say something?" he called out, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Mrs. Collins hesitated but nodded. "Of course, Brian." He stood up, his posture exuding defiance. "You all talk about respect and inclusion, but let's be real. This is just a bunch of fluff. What's the point of pretending we're all friends when we're not? People are who they are. You can't change that." The room fell silent. Lisa's heart sank as Brian's words hung in the air, a dark cloud overshadowing the positive atmosphere. She could feel the tension rising, the energy in the room shifting from hopeful to hostile. Kendra's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. "That's exactly the problem, Brian. You're choosing to see the worst in people instead of giving them a chance. It's not about pretending. It's about understanding and growing together." "Understanding? You think we can all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya?" Brian scoffed, his voice loud and mocking. "Life isn't a fairy tale. Some people are just weak, and expecting them to change is pointless." Lisa felt a rush of anger, but she knew she had to respond carefully. "Brian, it's easy to dismiss others when you're not willing to see the complexities of their experiences. Everyone has struggles, and by refusing to empathize, you're perpetuating the very divide we're trying to bridge." "Empathy doesn't change anything," Brian shot back, his expression hardening. "It's just a way to make people feel better about their failures." "Brian, that's not true," Amir interjected, his voice rising. "Empathy is what connects us. It's about realizing that we're all human, and we all face challenges. Ignoring that only makes us more isolated." The tension in the gymnasium was palpable, and Lisa could feel the atmosphere shifting again. Brian's friends exchanged glances, some appearing unsure of their allegiance. The tide was turning, but Lisa knew they needed to confront Brian head-on. "Brian, you have a choice," Lisa said, her voice steady. "You can use your influence to uplift others or to tear them down. Every time you choose the latter, you're creating a culture of disrespect that affects everyone." Brian's expression twisted in frustration, and for a moment Lisa thought he might actually reflect on his behavior, but instead he scoffed again. "And what if I don't care? Maybe I like being the bad guy." "Maybe you should care," Kendra countered, her voice unwavering. Because one day you might find yourself in a position where you need support. And if you keep pushing people away, you'll be alone. With those words, Kendra took a step closer to Brian, challenging him with her gaze. Lisa felt a surge of admiration for her bravery. The assembly had become a battleground, but Kendra was standing her ground. Your words have weight, Brian, Lisa continued, her heart pounding. They can either build bridges or create chasms, and right now, you're choosing to create a divide. Brian was silent for a moment, his bravado faltering as he looked around the gymnasium. Lisa could see doubt flickering in his eyes, and for a brief instant, she felt a glimmer of hope. But just as quickly, his expression hardened again. Whatever, you all can keep pretending to care. I'm done with this. With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the gym, slamming the door behind him. The noise echoed in the silence that followed, and Lisa felt a wave of disappointment wash over her. The assembly quickly resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Students were whispering amongst themselves, the energy that had once been hopeful now tinged with uncertainty. Lisa knew they had struck a nerve, but Brian's exit left a void that was hard to fill. As the assembly concluded, Lisa felt a mix of emotions swirling within her, relief, frustration, and a lingering sense of worry. The confrontation hadn't gone as she had hoped, but she refused to let Brian's negativity overshadow the progress they had made. Thank you all for your honesty today, Lisa said as students began to file out of the gym. Remember, this is just the beginning. We have the power to create change, and it starts with each of us. As the students left, Kendra approached Lisa, her expression a blend of determination and concern. Do you think we reached him? She asked, glancing toward the door Brian had exited. I think we planted a seed, Lisa replied, her heart heavy. But it's up to him to decide how to nurture it. We can't force change. He has to want it. Amir joined them, his expression thoughtful. I just hope he doesn't get worse. If he keeps acting like this, it could really hurt people. I know, Lisa said, feeling the weight of their concerns. But we'll keep working to create a safe space for everyone. We can't let his negativity overshadow the progress we're making. As the day drew to a close, Lisa found herself reflecting on the assembly and the challenges that lay ahead. Brian was a powerful force, and his influence could either uplift or tear down the community they were striving to build. But she refused to give in to despair. The following week, Lisa planned to meet with Mrs. Collins again to discuss the fallout from the assembly and brainstorm ways to support students like Amir and Kendra in the face of adversity. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Lisa was ready to face it head-on. As she walked out of the school building, the sun setting behind her, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Change was never easy, but it was possible, and with each step forward, she felt more empowered to fight for her students' futures. The following week began with a sense of unease that permeated the halls of Westfield High. Lisa Johnson arrived early, determined to maintain the momentum from the assembly. The echoes of Brian's remarks still lingered in her mind, and the consequences of his behavior had started to ripple through the school community. Students whispered in hallways, some expressing solidarity with Kendra and Amir, while others sided with Brian, emboldened by his arrogance. As Lisa entered her classroom, she noticed a cluster of students gathered in the corner, their hushed tones filled with tension. Kendra and Amir were at the center of the group, their expressions serious as they discussed the aftermath of the assembly. Good morning, everyone, Lisa greeted, her voice steady as she approached the group. I know the past week has been challenging, but I want to remind you that we're here to support each other. Ms. Johnson, I'm worried about what Brian might do next. Amir spoke up, concern etched on his face. He has a lot of influence, and I don't want to be the target again. I understand your concern, Amir, Lisa replied, her heart aching for her students. But remember, we have each other's backs. We can't let fear dictate our actions. We'll keep working together to create a safe environment. Kendra nodded, her determination shining through. We need to stand up for ourselves and for others who might be feeling the same way. We can't let Brian's negativity win. As the day unfolded, Lisa felt the weight of her students' fears. She decided to hold a class meeting to address the growing tensions and to strategize ways to foster unity. During the meeting, students shared their experiences, fears, and hopes for the future. Lisa watched as Kendra and Amir took the lead, encouraging others to speak up and share their stories. Fear can only thrive in silence, Kendra said passionately. If we keep talking, If we keep supporting each other, we can push back against the negativity. Amir added, we need to organize activities that promote inclusion, like a multicultural day or a student-led discussion group. That way we can celebrate our differences instead of letting them divide us. The room buzzed with energy as students brainstormed ideas, their voices growing louder with excitement. Lisa felt a surge of pride, her heart swelling as she witnessed her students come together, united in their resolve to foster a positive environment. But as the week progressed, Brian's behavior became increasingly erratic. He continued to spread rumors and ridicule Kendra and Amir, attempting to undermine their efforts. Lisa watched helplessly as his influence began to fracture the progress they had made. One afternoon, during lunch, Lisa received a frantic message from Amir. Ms. Johnson, you need to come to the cafeteria. Brian is picking on Kendra again, and it's getting out of hand. Lisa's heart raced as she grabbed her things and hurried to the cafeteria. When she arrived, she found Kendra sitting at a table, her face flushed with anger, while Brian and his friends surrounded her, their laughter echoing through the room. Look at her, trying to act all tough, Brian sneered, leaning forward. You really think you can change anything? You're just a wannabe leader, and everyone knows it. Kendra's expression hardened, but she held her ground. I may not change everything, but I'll stand up for what's right. You can't silence me, Brian. Silence? I'm just stating the truth, he shot back, his voice rising. This school is built on people knowing their place, and you don't belong at the top. Lisa stepped forward, her heart pounding. That's enough, Brian. This behavior ends now. You're creating a hostile environment, and it needs to stop. Brian turned to Lisa, his smirk faltering for the first time. Whatever. It's not like you can do anything about it. I can and I will, Lisa replied, her voice steady. This is not just about you. It's about creating a safe space for everyone. You have a choice. You can either uplift your peers or continue down this destructive path. Brian glared at her, but Lisa could see the conflict within him. You're wasting your breath, Ms. Johnson, he muttered, but his bravado was slipping. In that moment, Kendra spoke up, her voice clear and unwavering. Brian, you're better than this. You have the power to influence others positively. Why choose to tear people down when you could lift them up? The cafeteria fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Lisa could see the gears turning in Brian's mind, his expression shifting from defiance to uncertainty. For a brief moment, hope sparked within her. But just as quickly, Brian's anger resurfaced. You think you can change me? You're all just a bunch of losers, he spat, turning on his heel and storming out of the cafeteria. As the students began to murmur among themselves, Lisa felt a mix of disappointment and determination. We can't let Brian's negativity overshadow our efforts, she said, addressing the group. We need to continue to support one another and stand firm in our values. Over the next few days, Lisa, Kendra, and Amir worked tirelessly to organize a multicultural event, inviting students to share their cultures, stories, and experiences. They plastered the hallways with colorful posters, drawing attention to the event and encouraging participation. As the day of the event arrived, the gymnasium transformed into a vibrant celebration of diversity. Students gathered, showcasing their traditions, foods, and stories. Lisa stood back and watched in awe as her students celebrated their differences, their laughter and joy echoing through the room. But as the festivities continued, Brian entered, flanked by his friends. Lisa's heart sank as she recognized the familiar smirk on his face. She braced herself, knowing that confrontation was inevitable. What's this? Brian called out, his voice loud and mocking. A celebration of mediocrity? Please, you guys really think this is going to make a difference? Kendra stepped forward, her chin held high. This is about celebrating who we are, Brian. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. Brian sneered, but Lisa could see the uncertainty flickering in his eyes. The atmosphere in the gymnasium shifted as students rallied around Kendra, their solidarity palpable. Maybe you just don't understand what it means to be part of a community, Amir added, his voice steady. We're not trying to change you. We're trying to create an environment where everyone feels valued. As Brian stood there, the laughter and support from the other students washed over him like a wave, and for a moment he seemed to falter. Lisa felt a glimmer of hope, but she knew this was a turning point. Look, Brian, Lisa said, stepping forward, you have the choice to embrace this moment. You can either continue down a path of negativity or join us in building something meaningful. Brian remained silent, his expression hard to read. The tension hung in the air, and Lisa felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But just as she feared he would lash out again, Brian's demeanor shifted. He looked around the room, taking in the support Kendra and Amir had garnered. For the first time, he seemed to hesitate. I don't need this, he muttered, finally turning away and walking out of the gym. The collective breath of the room released as Brian exited. Kendra, Amir, and Lisa exchanged glances, relieved yet uncertain. I can't believe he didn't react more than that, Amir said, a mix of astonishment and hope in his voice. Do you think he'll come around? Kendra shrugged, her expression thoughtful. Maybe, but even if he doesn't, we've taken a significant step forward. This is about us, not him. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at Westfield High began to change. Students rallied around Kendra and Amir, fostering an environment of support and understanding. Brian's presence lingered, but the collective determination of the student body overshadowed his negativity. As the semester progressed, Lisa felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges they faced had only strengthened the resolve of her students. They were learning to stand up for one another, to embrace their differences, and to create a community where everyone felt valued. One afternoon, as Lisa sat in her classroom grading papers, she heard a knock on the door. When she looked up, she found Kendra standing there, her expression bright. Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, Kendra said, her voice earnest. You've really helped us find our voice. Lisa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. It's not just me, Kendra. You and Amir have led the charge. You've all inspired each other to create change. Kendra beamed. I just hope we can keep this momentum going, even if Brian doesn't come around. You will, Lisa assured her. You're all capable of making a difference. Remember, change takes time, but it starts with each of you. As the school year continued, Lisa watched her students grow, their confidence blossoming as they embraced their identities and supported one another. Brian remained on the fringes, but Lisa held on to hope that one day he might choose to join them. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of another successful school day, Lisa stood at her classroom door, greeting students as they filed out. The atmosphere was vibrant, filled with laughter and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the tension that had once permeated the hallways. Kendra and Amir walked past her, deep in conversation about their plans for the upcoming multicultural fair, their excitement palpable. Ms. Johnson, Kendra called back, pausing at the door. We're thinking of adding a talent show element to the fair. What do you think? I think that sounds amazing. It's a great way to showcase everyone's unique talents, Lisa replied, her heart swelling with pride. You two are doing incredible work. As Kendra and Amir continued down the hallway, Lisa felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The challenges they had faced together had forged a stronger community, one built on mutual respect and understanding. She realized that the journey was far from over, but they had taken significant strides in the right direction. Later that evening, Lisa reflected on the progress they had made. The assembly had been a turning point, a moment that had ignited conversations and fostered connections. Though Brian's path remained uncertain, she took comfort in knowing that her students were learning the importance of empathy and solidarity. The next day, as Lisa entered the school, she noticed a new energy in the air. Students were engaged, participating in discussions, and standing up for one another. The seeds of change had taken root, and she felt hopeful for what the future held. In the cafeteria, Lisa spotted Brian sitting alone at a table, his friends absent. He glanced up as she approached, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Lisa couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for him. She knew that change often began with a single moment of vulnerability. Hey, Brian, Lisa said, her voice softening. How have you been? He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Just trying to get through the day. Lisa took a seat across from him, determined to reach out. I know things have been tough. I want you to know that there's always room for you to be part of this community, if you choose to be. Brian looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. Why do you care? Because I believe everyone deserves a chance to be heard and to belong, Lisa replied earnestly. You have the power to influence others positively. I hope you can see that, Dad. He was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I don't know if I can change, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Change doesn't happen overnight, But it begins with a willingness to try, Lisa encouraged. You're not alone in this. We're all here to support each other, even when it's difficult. Brian's expression softened, and for the first time, Lisa sensed a flicker of hope. I guess I've been too focused on what's wrong instead of what's possible. Exactly, Lisa said, feeling a warmth spread through her. Every choice you make can lead to growth, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the next class, Brian nodded slowly. Thanks, Ms. Johnson. I'll think about what you said. Lisa smiled, her heart lifting as she watched him walk away. While she knew it would take time for Brian to embrace change fully, she felt proud of the progress they had made together as a community. The journey was ongoing, but with each step forward, Lisa felt more empowered to face the challenges ahead. She had witnessed the strength of her students, their resilience in the face of adversity, and their ability to foster change through unity. As she stepped into her classroom, ready to continue the work they had started, Lisa knew that she would always fight for her students, for their stories, and for the community they were building together. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.